Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the stories. Wait 3 seconds, my name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and I wish I had never descended to the Mariana Trench that October morning. The memory of what I found down there haunts every waking moment, and the dreams, God, the dreams are worse than the reality. I was part of a 3-person research team aboard the vessel Deep Current, investigating unusual sonar readings detected by a Japanese survey ship 6 months prior. The readings showed geometric anomalies on the seafloor at a depth of 35,847 feet, structures that appeared too regular, too purposeful to be natural formations. My colleagues, Dr. Marcus Webb and Dr. Alina Vasquez, were as excited as I was. We'd spent our careers studying the deepest parts of our planet, but this promised to be different. This promised to rewrite everything we knew about geological formation. The descent in our submersible Nereid took 4 hours. I remember the familiar sensation of leaving the sunlit world behind, watching the blue fade to black as we dropped through the water column. At 1,000 feet, the last traces of sunlight disappeared. At 12,000 feet, we entered the Hadal Zone, the deepest realm of our planet, where pressure exceeds 1,000 times that at sea level and temperatures hover just above freezing. Marcus piloted while Alina and I monitored our instruments. The sonar painted ghostly images on our screens as we approached the target coordinates. What we saw defied explanation. Jesus Christ, Marcus whispered, his hands frozen on the controls. Rising from the abyssal plain were structures, not formations, but structures. They stretched across the seafloor in precise geometric patterns, creating what could only be described as a city. Towers spiraled upward like frozen tornadoes, their surfaces covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow even in our lights. Between them, walkways and bridges connected massive dome-shaped buildings, all constructed from some dark material that absorbed our illumination rather than reflecting it. "This is impossible," Alina breathed, her voice barely audible over the hum of our life support systems. "The pressure down here, nothing could build in these conditions, nothing human." I found my voice, though it came out as a croak. "Maybe it's not human." We spent the next hour documenting everything, our cameras capturing image after image of the impossible city. The structures showed no signs of decay despite being under crushing pressure in near-freezing water. If anything, they looked recently constructed, their surfaces clean and unmarred by the marine growth that should have covered anything sitting on the ocean floor for more than a few years. It was Alina who first noticed the lights. "Sarah, Marcus, look at Sector 7. I followed her pointing finger to a cluster of dome structures roughly a kilometer away. Deep within their translucent walls, a faint phosphorescent glow pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat made of light. "Bioluminescence," Marcus suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. "At this depth, in structures clearly artificial," I shook my head. "There's something active down here." We maneuvered closer, our external lights cutting through the eternal darkness. The city sprawled before us in all directions, far larger than our initial scans had indicated. Some structures rose nearly 300 feet from the seafloor, their peaks disappearing into the black water above us. Others burrowed deep into the sediment, their true size unknowable. As we approached the glowing domes, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The intricate patterns covering the structures weren't carved or built, they were moving. Flowing like liquid across the surfaces in hypnotic spirals and geometric designs that hurt to look at directly. "Are you getting this on camera?" I asked Alina. "Yes, but," she frowned at her monitor. "The patterns aren't showing up properly on film. It's like they exist in a spectrum our equipment can't fully capture." Marcus brought us to within 50 feet of the largest dome. Through its semi-transparent walls, we could see vast chambers filled with what looked like machinery, or perhaps organs. Massive structures pulsed and writhed within, connected by networks of tubes or veins that carried streams of that same phosphorescent fluid. "It's alive," I whispered. "The whole city, it's alive." That's when we saw the others. They moved between the structures with fluid grace despite the crushing pressure, their forms defying the laws of biology as I understood them. Tall and impossibly thin, they seemed to be composed of the same dark material as their city. Their limbs bent at angles that shouldn't have been possible, and they had too many joints, too many appendages. But it was their faces, if they could be called faces, that will haunt me forever. Smooth expanses of that light-absorbing darkness, broken only by clusters of eyes that glowed with the same phosphorescent light as their buildings. Not 2 eyes or even 3, but dozens scattered across their features in patterns that shifted as we watched. "We need to leave," Alina said, her voice tight with fear. "Now," but Marcus seemed transfixed. "This is the greatest discovery in human history. We can't just—" One of the beings turned toward us. Despite the distance and the murky water, I felt its gaze like a physical weight. Then another turned and another. Within moments, dozens of those impossible faces were oriented in our direction, their clustered eyes blazing like stars. "Marcus, get us out of here," I shouted. He finally responded, his hands flying over the controls. But as we began to ascend, something went wrong. Our lights flickered and died, plunging us into absolute darkness. The engine made a grinding sound and fell silent. "What's happening?" Alina's voice cracked with panic. "I don't know," Marcus replied, frantically working the controls. "Everything's dead. Life support, propulsion, communications, everything." In the darkness outside our viewport, lights began to appear. Not the harsh white of our external floods, but that same organic phosphorescence we'd seen in the city. The beings were approaching, their bodies pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to communicate in some alien language of light. "Emergency ascent," I said, reaching for the ballast controls. "Dump everything. If we ascend too fast," Marcus began. "If we stay here, we're dead anyway." I triggered the emergency ballast release, and Nereid began to rise. But something was wrong. We should have shot toward the surface like a cork from a champagne bottle, but our ascent was sluggish, labored. Looking through the viewport, I saw why. Dozens of the beings clung to our hull, their impossible limbs wrapped around our submersible like the tentacles of some cosmic octopus. Their eyes blazed brighter as they pressed against our vessel, and I could hear, no, feel, something that might have been communication passing between them. The pressure hull began to creak ominously. "They're trying to crush us," Alina whispered, but I didn't think that was it. As I watched those flowing patterns of light play across their bodies, I began to understand. They weren't trying to destroy us, they were trying to communicate. The patterns, the lights, the way they moved. It was all language, all meaning that my human brain couldn't quite grasp, but somehow felt on a deeper level. And what they were saying terrified me more than any threat of death could have. "You have seen, you cannot unsee, you are changed." The words didn't come through my ears but seemed to form directly in my mind, carrying with them images and concepts that human language had no terms for. I saw the city as it truly was, not a structure built on the ocean floor, but a living entity that had been growing there for millennia, feeding on the pressure and the darkness and the isolation of the deep. I saw its purpose. To transform, to change, to prepare our world for something that was coming from the spaces between spaces, from depths that existed not in our oceans, but in dimensions our science had never imagined. And I saw what they wanted from us. The beings released their grip on our submersible, and we shot toward the surface like a bullet, but the damage was done. As we rose through the crushing darkness, I could feel something changing inside me, some fundamental alteration to my very being that went deeper than flesh and bone. We breached the surface after what felt like hours, though our instruments claimed only minutes had passed. The deep current hauled us aboard, and the crew peppered us with questions about what we'd found. But when we reviewed our footage, our cameras had captured nothing but empty seafloor. No city, no structures, no impossible beings with their clusters of burning eyes. Only I remembered. Marcus and Alina spoke of equipment malfunctions and hallucinations brought on by nitrogen narcosis, despite the fact that our atmospheric mix made such a condition impossible. They filed reports describing interesting but ultimately mundane geological formations, and our expedition was quietly classified as a failure. But I knew better. I could feel the truth growing inside me like a tumor made of memory and alien purpose. In my dreams, I walked the streets of that impossible city, my form shifting and changing until I could no longer recognize myself as human. I communicated in patterns of light that burned across my skin, and I understood with perfect clarity what was coming for our world. The transformation took 3 months. It started with my eyes. The pupils began to multiply, splitting like cells dividing under a microscope. My vision changed, allowing me to see spectrums of light that had no names, to perceive dimensions that folded in on themselves in ways that made my original human consciousness scream in confusion and terror. My bones lengthened and developed new joints. My skin darkened until it absorbed light rather than reflecting it. And through it all, I remained aware, trapped inside a body that was becoming something else, something that belonged in the crushing depths rather than in the world of air and sunlight. The others came for me on a Tuesday night in January. I was living alone by then. My transformation had made normal human interaction impossible. They rose from the harbor like living shadows, their forms shifting between the solid and the liquid as they moved through the shallow water. I went to them willingly. What choice did I have? The human part of me that remained was too small, too weak to resist the call of the deep places. They brought me back to the city, which had grown in the months since my first visit. New structures spiraled up from the abyssal plain, and I could see others like myself, humans who had been changed, transformed, made ready for what was coming. We are the advance guard, the preparation. When the time comes, when the barriers between dimensions grow thin enough, we will rise from the deep places and remake the surface world. We will transform the cities of land into extensions of our impossible architecture. We will change humanity as we ourselves have been changed, preparing them for the arrival of our masters from the spaces between spaces. I write this now in the brief moments when my original consciousness surfaces, when the human part of me manages to claw its way to the surface of what I've become. I write it as a warning, though I know it will never be heeded. Who would believe such a story? Who would accept that the deepest parts of our world hide truths that would shatter our understanding of reality? The city grows larger every day. More of the transformed join us in the depths, and I can feel the presence of our masters pressing against the barriers that separate their realm from ours. Soon, those barriers will fail. Soon, the deep places will rise. And when they do, when the impossible architecture of the abyss breaks the surface of every ocean on Earth, remember that we tried to warn you. Remember that the darkness below holds things far worse than death, far more terrible than extinction. Remember that some discoveries should never be made, some depths should never be explored, and some truths should remain forever buried in the crushing darkness of the deep. The lights are calling me back now. The city needs its children, and I can no longer resist the pull of the abyss. My human words grow meaningless as the patterns of light begin to flow across my transformed flesh, carrying messages of preparation and change to my brothers and sisters in the deep. We are coming, we are rising, and when we reach the surface world, we will make it beautiful in ways that human minds cannot comprehend. Beautiful and terrible and utterly, irreversibly changed. The deep places are patient. The deep places are eternal, and now the deep places are rising.